I've become very interested in the whole Green New Deal. Last night I was at a meeting of a Bernie rally. I didn't know what all was about. I wanted to find out a little bit more about what Bernie was standing for and so forth. I went over there. I found out that he really has probably one of the most comprehensive statements of the Green New Deal on his website. And there were probably about 20 of us aging hippies there, but that whole movement is much younger people. So I was just so pleased to see all the Democratic candidates were really addressing the issue of greening the economy and recognizing that there are things that we need to do there. I think we could all agree, and they all agreed, that we're at a crucial point in terms of the health of the planet. What I think really triggered my most recent concern is all the fires that we've been suffering here. The fact that we have to kind of live in terror for 6 months out of the year, not knowing when there's going to be a fire danger. I've got two smoke machines in my house to remove the smoke that my daughter got me because she doesn't want us to die of suffocation. But some of you, I think we had the worst air quality in the world last year with the fires, and I had to stay indoors for a week and say, this is crazy, this can't go on. And I mean, that's nothing by comparison to what other people are suffering from. So, I think Bernie said this, he said, the climate crisis is the single greatest challenge facing our country, but it is also our single greatest opportunity to build a more just and equitable future. So I think that's kind of the whole notion of this Green New Deal, to capture the opportunity of people's sense that we've got to do something and let's do it now. So to give you just a little bit of background, the Green New Deal is a plan to build a new economy, and it spells out how to do it through modernization to create a renewable energy economy as fast as possible. So the objective is to create a renewable energy, fossil fuel free economy in the quickest time possible. What it will do is to mobilize our economy through a range of infrastructure and industrial projects, and there are probably about 15 or 20 different projects and policies that are entailed in that, depending on whether you're on Elizabeth Warren's website or Bernie's website, or whether you read. There's not so much in the actual law that was passed by the Congress. I mean, it's not a law; it's a resolution. But it would mobilize the economy through a range of infrastructure and industrial projects to remove greenhouse gas emissions and pollution from every sector of the economy. It would also create millions of jobs in the building, repairing, upgrading of infrastructure. I know there's been many studies that point out that our infrastructure is falling apart. Those of us who have read about these bridges that are collapsing, buildings, public buildings, so forth. It would spend $1.3 trillion to ensure that displaced workers, especially those from like the coal industry, the oil industry, are retrained. They need to be retrained in solar and wind maintenance and so forth, and there are lots of jobs in those areas. It would meet our demand for power through clean and renewable energy and build energy efficient distributed smart grids. And I know we had a session on the smart grid just before this one, and that's really a very positive whole movement there. It would expand clean manufacturing, clean tech, which includes a range of things such as solar panel production, wind turbine manufacture, battery and storage. I don't know whether any of you received that information last week, that the state is now going to be providing subsidies for storage facilities if you're in a fire danger zone, and other energy efficiency technologies. It would build and repair and upgrade our public housing, which is a huge problem, I know I live in Berkeley, and there, homelessness is a huge issue there. I think it is over here as well. It would work with farmers and ranchers to create sustainable food systems and ensure universal access to healthy foods. So part of it has to do with and supporting small family farmers. It would build public transportation that's affordable, accessible, fast, and resilient by massively expanding electric vehicle manufacture, building charging stations, and God knows we really need those to come on quickly here in California to meet the targets that we've set for this year. Making high-speed rail, I know that's a controversial topic, but
can you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah,
please?
High-speed rail, which needs to be done. Something needs to be done about that, and that's an area that's controversial, but it works in every other country in the world. It would fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund of the federal government to safeguard natural areas, water resources, recreation areas, and our cultural heritage. And my final point, and there's much more to it, but would bring together the leaders of the major industrialized nations with the goal of using the trillions of dollars our nations spend on misguided wars to protect oil and the weapons of mass destruction, so that we can work together internationally to combat what is a global climate crisis. I mean, we're not going to solve the climate crisis by what we do here in the North Bay, but we have to start somewhere. Importantly, this will open up massive opportunities for business in the same way that, when we had the space program, that opened up opportunities for business. The internet, which is a federally funded project, has completely transformed it. It's hard to imagine the limits of the national and international business that was created by that federally funded project. And I think it recognizes the fact that the government is the best driver for the private sector and for development and economic development, at least in our history. Our panel is comprised of Damon Connolly in the center there. He's Marin County Supervisor. I imagine you all know him really well. He's a strong advocate of the values and priorities of the community. He's protected open spaces while increasing the availability of affordable housing. He's set our county on a path towards 100% renewable energy while keeping the fiscal house in order. Kudos for that. Damon helped expand transportation options for local residents. He worked to reduce San Rafael's contribution to climate change while serving as on the San Rafael City Council. He was a leader in the Green Ribbon Committee that developed San Rafael's climate change action plan. He helped San Rafael adopt a model green ordinance with some of the toughest green building standards in America. And because of his leadership, commuters, and myself being one that came over from the East Bay today, I'm able to use that Richmond-San Rafael bridge without having to wait 2 hours to get to the bridge, at least going back of the East Way. They still need to do more the other side. He has an open door policy in his office and frequently hosts town halls and community meetings, so you can go and talk to him, follow up with anything here. Another point is he lives 1 month a year car-free to put our public transit to the test to see if it's really working. So he's not a kind of an office. Is it 2?
Yeah.
Man, this guy's amazing. You really set the standard for other people. So as I mentioned, he was the Vice Mayor of San Rafael, supervising Deputy California Attorney General, and founding board member of Marin Clean Energy, among other things. Mike Blakeley, who's sitting right next to me, is the Chief Executive Officer of the Marin Economic Forum, a really important and critical institution in our North Bay region. He grew up in Marin County and has had a global career, which he's now bringing back, and all that he's learned and practiced around the world here, and we benefit from that here. Among his prior activities, he served for 15 years with Nathan Associates Incorporated, a global economics consulting firm, as managing director. In this role, he was responsible for implementation of large-scale economic development programs in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the U.S. I think he's going to be a tremendous asset when they finally pass the Green New Deal with all of his practically on-the-ground experiences here. Prior to this, he actually owned his own San Francisco-based company that exported agricultural goods, many of them from California. He also held positions with the U.S. Overseas Private Investment Corporation, or OPIC, and worked for the Economic Competitiveness Group in Berkeley, which produced the Marin Targeted Industries Study. And we'll ask him to talk a little bit about that. So that's Mike. And Marilee. Marilee Eckert is a trustee of the Buck Family Fund of the Marin Community Foundation. So she's the person with the big bucks. She was a chief executive officer of the Conservation Corps of the North Bay, so it's really nice to see taking that conservation background to the Buck Foundation. She worked there for 27 years, growing it from a $1.2 million organization to one with an over $7 million budget. It's a huge growth. She served for 12 years as a board member of the Corps Network, the National Association of Conservation Corps, receiving their Corps Legacy Achievement Award in 2013. She's a longtime executive member of the California Association of Local Conservation Corps. She also served on the Marin County Economic Commission, the Marin County Disaster Council, the Sonoma County Youth Council, and has been a board member for the Center for Volunteer Nonprofit Leadership of Marin, as well as Fire Safe Marin. She's received recognition from the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. She was an environmental hero of the North Bay and received the Environmental Justice Award from the Marin Club. It's the Sierra Club of Marin, so please join me in welcoming her. So I'm going to start by asking Damon to talk a little bit about, the economic development issues. We talked a little bit about this Green New Deal, and Damon has such extensive experience leading the Board of Supervisors and moving us towards clean energy here. So could you tell us a little bit, Damon, what you see as some of the major economic development issues that we face here in the North Bay, and the challenges facing Marin, and what more can we do?
Yeah,
what are your priorities
Bob,
here?
and thank you for teeing it up and for the warm introduction. Great to be here, everyone. And I think it's a suitable framework to talk. Oh, thank you. Here we go.
Sorry, guys.
For those watching by video, it's about 100 degrees. So gladly taking a glass of water here.
That's okay, I'm good.
You sure?
Yeah.
And a quick sip before we get going. The Green New Deal has captured the imagination of a lot of folks, and really, more than being kind of a clear-cut act right now, it's a set of principles and ideals that are being looked at around the nation. So here locally, I think you'll be happy to know that your Board of Supervisors in February of 2019 passed a resolution in support of the Green New Deal, urging Congress to actually take the next step forward, translate it into legislation, or at least a resolution, to really get it to that level. So what we're looking to do is figure out how can we achieve the goal of having a strong local economy, economic development that benefits all of our residents, but doing so in a way that is consistent with our values. So what we like to say around the Civic Center is that everything we do is guided by 3 E's, namely environment, equity, and economy. And in recent years, we've added a 4th E, and that is education. Where the Green New Deal comes in is far more than merely an environmental set of policies or economic principles. It really seeks, as Bob, I think, aptly summarized, to lay out a framework incorporating all those values into one. So what are we doing locally? What have we done? Where do we see this going? One example that I think we're all proud of is Marin Clean Energy, now known as MC Clean Energy. I had the fortune of being one of the founding board members, working with Charles McGlashan, then becoming chair of that after his untimely death. And really where that was set up is the idea that let's democratize local energy, the local power grid, give communities more of an opportunity to move away from simply relying on the monopoly utility, in this case PG&E.
Don't mean to interrupt, but I know you guys can use some ice cold things to wipe your faces. You just grab it out, squeeze it out, it's ice cold. If you need more, you let us know. Sorry to interrupt.
Excellent, yeah. So the idea was really setting it up and then moving toward a clean energy future. So bringing more local energy online, which has been occurring over time. The movement has really taken off. We were the first in the whole state of California. It was not without risk and controversy. I'm seeing some nods. You remember those days well, where we literally were under assault even to survive. Well, fast forward to today. Not only are many of the goals being achieved locally, a lot of new solar is coming online, a little bit of wind, biomass, but it's a movement that's taken afoot across the state where even within our CCA, Community Choice Aggregation program, several counties and other cities around the whole Bay Area, North Bay, are now joined in. Beyond our borders, throughout the state, other communities of all sizes are also looking to do this. What's the economic tie-in? Well, our theory, at least, was always that if you move more toward clean energy and that kind of technology and innovation, it can also be a boon to the economy. And it sure has been. You see local companies coming online. You see ancillary benefits in terms of business and choice as a result of this. So there's challenges that remain with this program, but that's one example that's really worked. Let me point to a couple of other things as well, and I'm actually looking forward to having a conversation and your questions too. Along the same lines, we adopted recently a much stronger green building ordinance at the county level. As was noted, this has been a real interest of mine for a while, back to our City of San Rafael days. And more recently with the county, we're focused on a couple of different things. One is EV charging station infrastructure. We're all making a move toward greening our transportation, and we can talk a little bit about that. Specifically, that is the biggest challenge for Marin. Most of our greenhouse gas emissions are from the transportation sector. A close second, though, is our building sector. So really, how do we make buildings more energy efficient? How do we have EV infrastructure so that people can be encouraged to buy that car or lease that car, to utilize those systems as well? One of the big issues, and you're probably following this around the Bay Area, is many communities are looking at the option of banning natural gas in new buildings. Some are now saying, because natural gas traditionally, at least relatively speaking, was seen as a cleaner fuel. Well, now people are wising up, and some are going so far as to say, in effect, it's the new coal. Because coal is a very small part of our energy usage right now. Natural gas is still a large portion, but renewables are increasing. So at this point, Marin has taken a strong step. namely a pathway toward an all-electric future. All new building construction, there are several ways that you can get and are incentivized to get to 100% electric. So in other words, if it's your water heater, your stove, or whatever, with some limited exceptions, I'd overall like to see us, and I said this at our hearing yesterday, get to that point of where Berkeley is and where San Jose is now moving and other communities where we're actually looking completely beyond natural gas. So keep an eye out for that. Here's a huge portion of the Green New Deal, at least as I'm seeing it, and again with the summary, the equity piece. In Marin County, we have, so you talk about our economy, we have 2.4% unemployment. So I was an econ major at Cal, and what we learned is if you're at 3%, that's full employment. You actually can't even go below. But lo and behold, you can. So what could be wrong? Well, we know that economic opportunities in Marin County and many places are very uneven. And that's really what we're focusing on, is creating job opportunities for folks in underserved communities. Two groups that we're really focused on for different reasons are youth, creating pathways. Not everyone is going to a four-year college these days, nor wants to, given the cost, which is crazy, as we all know. And also seniors. Many seniors now, either by necessity or for whatever reason, choice, want to get back into the workforce or upskill. So how do we do that? So one of my assignments is I'm actually chair of the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, which is actually a new consortium which takes all the pre-existing, each county in California has a workforce development agency, if you will, a career point center. This innovative program combines those of Lake, Mendocino, Marin, not Sonoma, they should be with us, and Napa. And we actually have a joint powers agreement under the theory that in the North Bay a lot of people work in one area, live in another, use transit, etc. So we're combining forces and really looking at how we can make those opportunities better. Construction industry, among others, is really stepping up. Apprenticeship programs are big, again, pre-apprenticeship programs. Again, going to underserved communities. Traditionally, a lot of folks don't even hear about these jobs unless you have a parent who's in the construction business or you happen to know someone. This is a concerted effort to do outreach. You combine it with education through College of Marin or Dominican, as the case may be, Sonoma State, high schools, career technical education programs. So in many ways, it's almost back to the future, right? Back at least when I was in high school, it seemed like there were more opportunities in that regard. We're remembering now and rediscovering how important those career pathways are. So that's really been good as well, and I think really fits in with the overall Green New Deal concepts that we're talking about. So I'll leave it there, and I know you're going to have some follow-ups later.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
What do you see in terms of the potential, the need, what needs to be done in terms of worker training, education, retraining, what can be done here? And you were telling me when we talked before today about the Marin County business and retention and expansion. You've been doing that. You've learned a lot. If you could tell us a little bit about what you found on that and what maybe should be our focus in the future. Can market-based solution incentives work in some ways? So Well, just tell us what you've been working on, what you're thinking, and where we're going in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the question, and thanks everybody for being here. It's really a pleasure to talk about this subject, actually near and dear to our organization. So MEF, we like to think of ourselves as sort of like a think tank. So we try to be very forward-looking on these policy and economic issues. And so you asked a couple of interesting things there that are actually very closely related. You asked about the labor market and job training and the future of jobs, and then you cited a program that we're in the middle of right now called the Marin County Business Retention and Expansion Program. The purpose of this program, which is actually funded by the county, thank you very much, was really to strengthen the dialogue between the public sector and the private sector. And in Marin County here, we don't have a publicly funded economic development agency. We're the only region in the 9 Bay Area county where that's the case. Sonoma County, for example, has one that's funded with $7 million of taxpayer dollars. So they have a little more opportunity to dive into these kinds of issues than we do here in Marin. So we proposed this program so that we could get in front of Marin County businesses and understand their challenges, but more importantly, what are their opportunities to grow? And what do they need in terms of support? Because the goal of this is not to be a study, but to initiate activities and support programs in line with everything else the county is doing to make sure that our businesses here in Marin have the opportunity to grow. So, as you might have assumed or already known, the number one issue businesses in Marin County face is workforce. Hiring and retaining workers. Any of you who live here or visit here, you'll see in the downtown areas either vacant stores or those with help wanted signs. And so this is problematic for a couple of reasons. Number one is Damon talked about the unemployment rate at 2.4%. Actually in May it dipped below 2. Wow. Actually 1.9% in May, which is, it's only done that one other time, which was exactly 20 years ago in 1999, and also in the month of May. So it's an understatement to say that we're in a tight labor market here. But I think understanding the way forward is understanding sort of why we are in this situation. So it's not just that we are in a strong economy, right? So California has had 113 straight months of job growth. That is more than any other state. And the other interesting fact is that for 50 years, the state of California has had sustained economic growth. It's the only state in the union to do that. So to say that California is booming and that we've come out of the Great Recession stronger than any other state is an understatement, and we see it every day with the tight labor market, cost of living, and other things. So going back to your point about what do we do about jobs? So Marin County already has a deficit when it comes to the number of jobs that we have here and the resident labor force. As a result of that, which has been the case, we already import about 60+% of our workers. We have the lowest percentage of young people in the entire Bay Area. Less than 10% of our population is aged 18 to 34, so our future workforce pipeline is at risk. And as Damon mentioned, we have a proportion of our demographics of older adults, which by 2030 is going to be a higher proportion than we have today. So we are losing workers now to age. We don't have enough young workers to replace them. We've exhausted our ability to import workers, already reaching a very high level, and every employer on the street will say, I can't grow because I don't have people. So this is the problem that our county finds ourselves in, and it is unique to Marin County. It's a tight labor market in the Bay Area, even in some nationally in some spots, but Marin has some unique challenges. So that is where MEF has validated that through the companies themselves and the research that we've done and the data that we observe. Now the question is, what do we do about this, right? And so this is where if you want to start looking at what are the future opportunities and marrying that with the Green New Deal and opportunities and for sustainability, sustainable enterprises and all that, it starts to get really interesting. Because in Marin County, of the labor force that we do have that lives here, quite a few of them are high-skilled professionals. The problem is that they leave the county, further stressing our transportation networks because the better jobs are out there. So one of the things that we're pondering at MEF is how do we have a conversation with the county and with the residents about the need to have a strategy to bring some of those better jobs here that would not only perhaps help confront the transportation issues that we see, but also set us on a pathway to having sectors with good paying jobs in the future. And certainly it's within the ethos and the spirit of Marin County to want to have jobs and companies and a sector here that's contributing to environmental sustainability or the climate. Right? That's very much within our DNA. So our task at MEF is how do we put forward the mechanisms and platforms to enable that to happen? And again, that's a conversation that has to be community-wide and collaborative, but it starts with the fact we all have this shared value of what we're talking about today, and now it comes to what Supervisor Rice said this morning, making it practical and tactical in the implementation side.
So is there something more that government could do? You're a non-profit organization, right? Is there something more that government could do in order to facilitate that? I think the two things are related is the lack of affordable housing here, right? And the lack of high-paying jobs in some of these areas that people are leaving the county for. So do you see that there's anything that the state, I mean, basically state or local government could do to facilitate that? Or us in the educational community, maybe we're not doing our job right? Speaking, as a long-term educator, and one of the problems we often have is we say, well, are we really providing the right kind of training that's needed for the economy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not going to touch the housing issue because that's well known in Marin, and there's a lot of organizations who have good ideas about how to do that. But I do see, when I look at our labor market, I do think the education piece is actually what you could refer to as a structural problem. And the reason being that between Dominican and College of Marin, they have less than 1,000 graduates a year. That doesn't even begin to touch the 147,000 jobs that we have in Marin County. So the education sector is not providing enough of the workforce. But in addition to that, they're maybe not aligned with what private sector in Marin wants and needs. Now, to be fair, I've spent a lot of time in workforce development. That is the single hardest challenge, is translating private sector demand back through the educational system. That is, everybody struggles with that. So I don't think that our educational entities are doing anything wrong, but I do think the pressure is on them in terms of being a better resource to that. But that then goes back to something that I suggested, where the county does not really have a longer term strategy for what it wants its economy to be. And so that makes it even more difficult for our educational institutions to understand what they are going to offer to the resident and any student that's going to be here. So that's a challenge that that it's very acute for them right now. And I think that they are working on this because we talk with them. But this is a challenge that it's yet to be determined how exactly well they will overcome that.
And I can touch on that a little bit. So one framework we're looking at right now, and again, I'm looking at our audience, I think many are familiar with this, but just to put it out there, a program called Drawdown Marin, which we've launched with actually starting in October 2017, which actually is a way of bringing in the business community and a broader cross-section of residents into the climate change conversation, but particularly as it relates to things like transportation, green building, food waste. Not surprising that a lot of the areas where you are seeing innovation in Marin that also has local economic impact, community resiliency, for example. So the challenge has always been, I think everyone obviously is concerned about these big issues, but how does it impact us locally? How do we engage people locally? And Drawdown Marin is kind of our attempt to do that right now. It's getting underway. We have working groups. One thing that's great about Marin is the level of expertise we even have in our community on a lot of these issues. So just as Mike does every day as well, tapping into that expertise on these areas, and economic benefit is right there in the mix on potential outcomes of that.
Great. Well, you just set things up for my next question, which goes to Marilee. and that is, how can we assure that there's no conflict between these economic development issues and directions and preserving our environment? And perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about your work at the Conservation Corps of the North Bay.
The initial question that Robert and I talked about was, how do we put a value on the environment, right? That's like one of the things we were talking about. And I said that when I was working at a job training program in Oakland when I applied for the job at Conservation Corps North Bay. And one of the interview questions they asked me is, why do you want to work at the Conservation Corps? And I said, you know, we can place people in all the jobs we want, and that's great, but if we don't save this planet, and if we don't have air to breathe and water to drink, it's not going to matter. So, you know, I think that we've seen, you know, that was a long time ago that I said that, but we've seen it play out. And we see that saving our planet is the bottom line for all life on Earth. Not just for humans, but for animals and wildlife and our trees and everything. So I think that it's, if we look at it from that perspective of, hey, nothing's going to survive without it, it becomes a number one priority, right? So I think that some people just don't understand or reject that idea, but most people, I believe that most people believe how important it is, and that it is extremely critical to prioritize our home here on Earth. So trying to figure out trying to figure out how to do that quickly becomes overwhelming. You know, we see our communities burning down, we see flooding and hurricanes and, you know, all kinds of things like that going on, and it, you know, you want to like put your head under the pillow and like try to forget about it, but we can't do that. And I feel like what we really need is a comprehensive plan where that we can all get behind. It has to be doable, and it has to make economic sense. And we've talked about a lot of the things here today, but also I've been in side conversations where there have been people making comments that kind of pick apart a certain aspect, or, you know, like, oh, I'm upset about this, or I don't think we should go in that direction. But we really need to come together on this and make a plan, and we need our government officials, we need our private sector people, our nonprofits, our social enterprises to come together and really work together to make this happen, because it's vital. I also see it as an opportunity to educate our young leaders and children, and we talked about that this morning. I mean, they're going to inherit this problem, and to engage and advocate for prioritizing the solutions. If our children think it is important, they will push their parents. I remember when I'm pretty old, and when I was a kid, litter was the problem. If only litter was our problem now, right? But, you know, like, they had all these programs in the school to teach us about litter and don't litter, and then the kids went home and said, oh man, Mom, Dad, we can't litter, you know, and really pushed it at home. And now this is more serious than the litter on the roads when I was a kid. This is like the future home of our children. So I think it's also a great opportunity, and coming out of working for the Corps, certainly this was a lot of it, it's a great opportunity to provide training and job in trade areas, such as solar, green building, forest management, and carbon farming. I don't think we can separate the climate, the bring down the carbon problem from that. The carbon problem is already there, and it's creating wildfires, and it's creating problems for our community, I think that we have to be looking at both the solution to the problems that we're dealing with and how do we change the situation. I mean, I remember last year at Pioneers when the DiCaprio Foundation talked about that we had a year to do certain things, right? We're talking, like in here today, we've been talking about what are we going to do the next 30 years. It's more we don't have 30 years. We need to take the action now. And what the DiCaprio Foundation was talking about that we needed to do within a year, 15 years ago we've been talking about at Pioneers that's what needed to be done, and we hadn't taken the steps and done it. So now, okay, now we're in the crisis. So, but if we don't, so we need to engage the younger generation, and they can't lose hope. Now, I've seen this, many of you have probably seen this going around, and I'll read it to you. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as if your house is on fire, because it is. And yes, I'm not disagreeing with that, okay? I think that is absolutely true. And having worked with young people coming from difficult circumstances, I also know that it's important to keep hope alive. So I think we need both. I mean, sometimes when I was working with people at my, I worked at Oakland Youth Works and then at the Corps. So this has been like 30 years, okay, that I've been working with young people and we've come from some pretty distressed situations. And I remember asking, we're talking about careers. What do you want to do? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And not just once, but multiple times, young people would say, 5 years? I hope I'm alive in 5 years. So if you don't see yourself alive in 5 years, you turn to substances, you turn to gangs, you turn to things to take care of your immediate situation, and you're not thinking long term or how you're going to solve that. So I think there's multiple perspectives out there in our young people, and we need them all to believe that working toward this goal will make a difference. I think that's the key. And that's where I see the hope coming in. They have to believe that doing these actions and getting engaged will make a difference and will help protect this planet that they and our future generations need, right? So the other thing that I've seen, I can tell you that nothing turns a life around faster than being part of the solution. And nothing makes someone more committed to their life and being a positive force in their community than being part of the solution. Remember of course you do, the fires in Sonoma County a couple years ago, and after the fires, there were these huge signs all over the freeway that said, thanking the firefighters and calling them heroes and, all of that. Well, if someone becomes a community hero, there's nothing will make them a positive change in their life more than that. I mean, if someone who's struggling now sees themselves as a community hero and a positive force in their community, you have changed a life. So I think it's really important to do that and to engage all of our youth and all of our young people and get them. I mean, they need our guidance. I believe they need our guidance, but they need to be part of this solution and to make this happen.
Great. So at this time, what I'd like to do is to engage you in being part of the solution. So I'd like people to turn to a person who's sitting next to you, introduce yourself, and I'd like you to come up with your recommendation in terms of opportunity for greening economic development in Marin, or a question that you might have. And so we'll take about 5 minutes to do that, then you can pose those questions to our panelists or share them. So, but I want us to have some engagement where you talk to the person next to you and get to know someone who's here. Contributions, questions. You guys seem to have quite a lively conversation.
Well, we figure that there's three areas. There's the environment, and there's jobs, and then there's the socio-politic part of it. So
I want to change the tax code so that we create a middle class. And I think part of our problem is that we're going to come up with jobs for the trades because there's going to be a whole new set of trades that need to be trained and developed. But how are we going to motivate people to go in those trades, right? Obviously, if they don't have any job, they're going to be motivated. But I'm suggesting that we just need to also attack that lack of middle class in order to get people where the jobs are. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's enough money that you could say, all right, we're going to, we need you here to do trades, because right now I think the tradespeople are coming from Santa Rosa. And to say, if you work in the trades or one of these new desirable areas, then we're going to reimburse. We're going to give you a credit. Maybe it's a state credit. I don't think you really can do this on a county level. That there's a state credit for those people in those jobs that in turn create a middle class, or at least offset some of the rent costs that they have, or housing costs.
Housing is huge.
Yeah. Well, we were just going back and forth between. I was really enjoying we're also having this very strong desire to do now. Like there's the bigger picture and the structural, like the structural needs, particularly the tax code. But then also, what can we do now? What are low-hanging fruit? What can we, how can we get there and be impactful right away? We didn't get a chance to talk about this, but I have a couple of questions on that front for you as a panel. I was a little astonished with Marine clean energy. I wanted to validate a statistic where they have the optional buy-in if you're a Marine clean energy for deep green, where you pay, $5 a month more?
Right.
And here in Marin County, what I was told was 10% utilization of that. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but that to me is an astonishing low number with this community and the policy. I mean, the mentality and the buy-in that we have, and the wealth, and people are not opting as an option to pay $5 a month more to have 100% renewable energy.
I think it's for education problem. For some reason we're not reaching.
It's low-hanging fruit.
To me, that seems like an incredible low-hanging fruit. And is that also, I wondered where the businesses, is that optional for them as well? Mm-hmm. And what is that utilization? Is that even lower? Or do we know?
It's probably equivalent, let's say, which is, again, not high. There are incentive programs for businesses. You get recognized if you're a deep green business.
There's about 300 businesses in Marin County that are
growing.
Are green
Green certified?
Certified, yeah.
Yeah, so there needs to be more. But going to your point, I love the idea of maybe looking at tax incentives. The good news, and I heard this recently from none other than Al Gore, caught him in San Francisco at something, who mentioned that the fastest growing job category in America right now is solar installer. And the second fastest is wind turbine installer. So we're getting there, but how do we continue to incentivize that? And part of it, again, bringing it back, is providing those career pathways right now. It is, you've got to be technologically savvy, and you've got to have that skill set to do it.
So some of the high schools have actually started these kinds of programs where they learn those skills and start working in 1 day a week. And so I think Oakland has a high school that's doing that. So
Can
I think
I
it's good to look.
just address the
Yeah.
middle class issue
Yeah.
and the labor issue and this idea of low-hanging fruit. So I talked about the low volume of young people that we have here in Marin County. And so that's concerning for how you would plug the local population into job opportunities. But what's really happening here, which I think there's a way to change it, is the current demand on jobs, whether it's solar installer or solar tech or an auto technician or others in the trades industries that would be associated as typically middle class jobs, there is a low awareness on what the salaries of these jobs actually are. An automobile technician is a six-figure salary that does not require a college degree. In the trades, if you talk to Gelati Construction, who has partnered with the Marin Builders Association to put a program in high schools, if you talk to them about the wealth that a 25 or 26-year-old who has worked from them straight out of high school, and when I look at what that would be toward a traditional college student, forget about whether they have student debt or not. It's like the compound interest scenario where that, from a wealth perspective, they're further ahead. And so in Marin County especially, there is an opportunity to do a better job of educating high school students on the pathways into middle skilled jobs where they can make wages that are actually quite competitive. They may not buy you a house in the next 5 years, but they are certainly superior to some college, right out of college types of jobs that are there. And so whether it's in the agriculture sector that we have here in Marin, the solar sector, which is nobody can find jobs there, nobody can find workers in that sector, whether it's the automobile tech sector, and it's, again, I'll go back, I think there's an opportunity, whether it's in high school and the career to pathway programs that the Marin Office of Education is trying to fund, or whether it's what we do at the community college level.
Have you heard about the construction careers program?
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's the one.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of them that exist, and the Marin County Office of Education has even looked at sectors like virtual reality and augmented reality, XR, and so they come with these internships and apprenticeships and all that. So I think there's an opportunity to put a stronger focus on our young population that's here right now and allowing them a pathway to a middle skilled job that the evidence is there of its compensation being quite competitive and interesting and being able to be well beyond a sustainable, livable wage.
And talk about fitting in with the resiliency of the North Bay, particularly with the rebuild going on as well.
Can we take a question? Yeah.
I had one comment on MCE. The problem a lot that I heard is that people don't know about it. You look at your bill from PG&E, and you might say in the small letters, you know, what service you're getting, whether it's Marin Clean Energy Light or Deep Green. My belief is you have to go through the CPUC to force PG&E to put pamphlets in your bill and send them out so that you know you can get these things. And I think you can talk to Mike McGuire, our state senator, Mark Levine. I think these would be good places to start to be able to push toward more people utilizing MCE.
I think also go into the schools, you know, like, and if the kids know about it, and I mean, Carlene Collin is here today, and she's from Cool the Earth, and SEI has a table over there, Strategic Energy Innovations, and if they, you know, like, they're in the schools and working with kids and giving them, I mean, the Corps was also in a program for a while that was called Curb Your Carbon, and it was funded by the Marin Community Foundation. It was those two organizations in the Corps, and working with kids in the schools, but it's the same thing as the litter, right, that I was talking about before. If we're in there telling kids what they can do, and I know that there were incentives for kids, like if they did so many things at their home, then they would get a little prize or something like that, and you know, where, I mean, that really helps.
Question is back.
So I want to key off the Deep Green discussion a little bit and just say that, you know, to me, the productive place to put any energy about Deep Green is at the board of MCE, which, Damon, you sit on that board?
No,
Or did
not
you did, but okay.
Yeah.
Lots of representatives are there, easily accessible, and make sure that they stick to their master plan of 100% green renewable energy for system-wide in 3 years. And you know, if we got 5% adoption now, we're not going to get to 100% by inspiration, by inspiring people. And I think that's true all along. We're not going to get to where we need to get in the time we need to get there by inspiring people. And I say that as someone who does a lot of talking, you know, to people trying to
So
get them
a
to
couple
move.
things.
But
Yeah.
let me just add. So I think so that's just an example. I think providing, as you were saying, a workforce that provides meaningful work stewarding the world, the environment, and including the tech world that we're all creating, to be sustainable and deal with this existential crisis that we're dealing with. I mean, that's meaningful work, and that can occupy all of us for the rest of our lives and inspire us to get involved and do it right. So I'm all for that, you know, develop that sector in Marin would be a great step forward.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But just to clarify, so getting to 100% system-wide is not going to be through deep green. The baseline product, which is now light green, started at 50% renewable. It's already increased, I think, to about 70%. Really, the goal is to get that to 100%. So then it's
Right.
then
Right. We
it's
can
a
talk about
done
that, but it
deal.
gets to clean energy by and large.
It needs an advertising campaign. Pay
All
them
of those
pay them
ideas are
five-
great.
Social media.
$5
Believe it or not,
to
you
join.
guys, and this is sad, I think our level of deep green in Marin is lower than other areas who are part of MC, and I think part of that is the legacy of just the war we had to get this going in Marin and the negativity around it,
And the
which I
money
think
that
we've
PG&E
largely
threw
overcome. But interestingly, like in the East Bay, once they adopt this program, the numbers start higher and go up. Yeah, exactly. So we actually have to make that much more of an effort in Marin.
Another question?
Yes, we had an interesting discussion because we really see things differently. And let's see, Jan, okay, he's from the private sector, and he has his reservations about the Green New Deal and about what can be done, and he will express that. And I'm looking at it from the point of view of the importance of building public support for this, because the schools are great, the schools that have programs, but you really can't count on the schools to do the job of the big public education part. It has to happen in many ways, and I think we have, even in Marin, we have a long way to go before, or maybe I'm wrong, you must have done some studies about, before you adopted the Green New Deal as a policy of the county, you must have looked at where you were coming from.
Youth was a big part of it.
What?
First, youth were
Youth
a
was
big part of it. Yeah.
But anyway, so I thought it'd be good for him to give his perspective.
So my perspective on the Green New Deal is that there's too many moving parts. It tries to conflate saving the environment with changing the economic system in the United States. And I think there's just too many, I mean, as an engineer, there's multivariate things. You need to control one variable at a time to kind of know what's working. You try to put everything together at once. If it works, you don't know why it really works. If it doesn't work, you don't know how to fix it. And so that would be my reservation of the Green New Deal. So I think I'm on board with saving the environment. My challenge, I think, for Marin is that things that we can afford in Marin are not necessarily scalable within the rest of the country, even the rest of the world. But I do like the idea of encouraging the youth to understand that there are these mid-level jobs that don't require college education, that can get them to work today and do something constructive.
But the kids in Marin are all sort of from wealthy families, so.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
Well,
and
no,
again, this
it's
is
not.
an attitude thing that is perpetuated by a lack of information, real information about what the career opportunities are in certain sectors. So for example, just yesterday, the reason I know about automobile technicians is because I met with all the auto dealerships here in Marin County yesterday. And I asked them, you know, well, what does it mean for a career if you want to go into this? And they're the ones that said, you know, people just don't understand that technicians, it's a very well-paid job. It's a middle-skilled job that you can accomplish over time. But then we have things like the general manager of a dealership. That is just as of a white-collar, well-compensated job as any other one that you have sitting in front of a computer. And so there, you talk to the construction sector, you talk to the agriculture sector, it's the same thing. They're all saying, you know, we're concerned that no kids here in Marin are going to want to go into these sectors. And the concern of the Marin Economic Forum on that is if you look at the contribution of those sectors to our economy now, not just in terms of what their output is, but the jobs that they provide for residents now, the goods and services they provide to residents now, the contribution to the tax base, and by the way, Marin County companies are excellent on the philanthropical level. They are strong members of our communities. And so if you put that at risk by not, you know, looking at the labor force, looking at what sectors might need more support from the public sector, that's the big picture of where we get concerned on the labor issue, and why we think that through the Green New Deal and education about jobs that don't necessarily require a college degree is something that would be low-hanging fruit.
So are you looking at the trade-off if we become more concentrated on jobs that are not fossil fuel oriented jobs, if we're looking at more jobs in solar, wind, whatever the source of energy is, we see more of that becoming big in Marin? You see ways of getting people retrained?
Yeah, so all of this needs to be looked at is what I'm arguing here. We need to understand what our potential is to have competitive sectors in, let's say, the green sector, right? That could be a number of different things. And if we decide as a community that that's something that is worthy of pursuing and economically viable and potentially an opportunity, then you start to translate it back through the system and you look at, say, well, then how do we make sure we have a workforce for that? Because as I said earlier, it's no longer sustainable to have 60+% people coming in here and a young population and a diminishing workforce at the older adult population. So what needs to be looked at is, and this is exactly what we're talking about today, is what opportunities for Marin County residents and its economy does the Green New Deal or even green sectors present? And I would argue that if you unpack what economic development is in terms of infrastructure and education and workforce and all that, there's huge opportunities. That's clear.
Along those lines, but framing it a little differently, Santa Clara is the Silicon Valley of the U.S. What could Marin County be the valley of?
Can I actually bounce off of your question? I think that, I mean, it could be the green, valley or whatever.
I'm curious both from a data perspective as well as an aspirational perspective, so I'd like to hear a few of you answer it even.
Well, certainly, I don't know if there's any unique sector that Marin could do. Now, life sciences is interesting. I don't think it's taken off as much as people would have expected, especially relative to other areas, and that's because of issues like we don't have the right space and zoning, and that really proves a challenge. So, yes, you have the Buck Institute, you have a lot of these, you have these anchor companies like BioMarin, and you have a good reason to potentially invest in that sector. But how does that play against other regions where it may be more competitive to have that? Thinking that through is really a luxury, especially absent an economic development agency that would otherwise do that. We're trying to take on some of those kind of questions and look at the Bay Area regionally and see where the opportunities are. It always has to be balanced out with what your assets are, right? And so we don't have a labor force. And so there are a huge number of professionals in the tech sector here, both on the engineering, technical side and on the business operations side, that leave because those companies aren't here. But if you ask a company like Glassdoor, which is a globally recognized company, born in Marin, now leaving Marin, the simple answer is we don't have enough engineers. Now, hypothetically, if Marin County would have said 10 years ago, this tech sector thing that's happening in Silicon Valley is moving really fast, we might have an opportunity to capture that because of our highly educated population. Let's make a plan to maybe track some companies here and let's see what they need. To do that, they would have said we need an engineering workforce. I learned the other day, this is not a slam on College of Marin, but if you want to pursue a 4-year education in engineering, and you're going to take the model of going to community college first and then transfer. You can't do that. You can't meet your requirements through the College of Marin. You'd have to go to Santa Rosa JC or others. They don't have the basic course offerings to put you on a path towards an engineering degree at a four-year university. Again, capturing what's unique about Marin, right? So what's been happening is like VenturePad, and now there's a WeWork, and for those of you who may know, there's an outstanding place in Mill Valley called the Hivery, which is women-owned for women businesses, co-working spaces that are really communities. When you have a situation in Marin where you have all these people at home, I worked from home for 5 years, and I did not really prefer that versus being in an office
I'm not
environment.
a home guy.
Yeah.
But
Yes, right. So a
some
lot of
people
our,
are.
so I think that's interesting
Yeah.
for our residents. At the same point in time, if you start looking from a commercial real estate perspective, many of you know we don't have much Class A office space to go out and offer for a professional services firm to come here. But there is industrial or Class B that can maybe be repurposed into a workspace. You know, these opportunities are out there for people to discuss and debate.
Well, I'd just like to add something. As someone who is known not to shy away from controversial topics, I think that housing is a major issue for Marin County because
and transportation.
Yep, and transportation. Because I think what I've seen is that you can actually get people for the lowest level positions, and you can get people for the high level positions. But Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler is from the Corps. It's very difficult to get the middle positions because they can't afford to live here. And also, here we are at this green business, and we should be talking about the type of housing that's offered. And it's so controversial here because people don't, there's a lot of not in my backyard, but the way that the sprawl that we have here compared to what we could do with some higher density housing that would be more affordable would be very useful to our economy.
We are tackling the issue. There are ways to do it in a way in Marin where I think that what folks don't want is large high density. They want to keep the sense of kind of the open space and what makes Marin unique, but I think people are definitely recognizing the issue. So we're pursuing a whole host of measures to do that. That could be a whole separate panel.
I think it ties in with the transportation though too, because that seems to be where I hear a lot of it. Like, no, then we're not going to be able to get out. Like it's going to back up the traffic and all that sort of thing is often the argument. So if there was, easily accessible transportation, public transportation that people could use, I think that would help a lot.
It's getting better. We still have to improve it,
Yeah.
but we do actually have a good transit system locally and regionally. SMART is now online. Voters will likely be asked to renew that measure coming up in March. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to ride it. Biking is an option that we're trying to even increase that availability with pathways, etc., e-bikes. So there's not one solution to housing and transportation, but it's going to require a lot of different things, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all. What works in San Francisco may not be appropriate for Marin.
One last question.
Yeah.
No. We'll take two.
In fall of 2017, the Advancement Project published the Race Counts report, which was a look at all 58 counties in in the state, and ranked Marin County as #1 in racial disparity, meaning last in racial equity. So that was fall of 2017. First Five Marin, an organization here in Marin, invited the executive director of Race Counts, or of the Advancement Project, to come to Marin and present on the findings of that report in March of 2018. And at that talk, one of the things the Advancement Project said was, don't have your economic development conversation over here, because that was one of the areas we are bad in, and don't have separately your racial issues conversations over here, have them in the same space together. And so I think that whether we're relating this to housing or to transportation or, where we're going, what the purpose of Marin County is in this larger global sense, I think that some of those pieces, and I've been to economic development conversations, a few of them in the last couple of years, and repeated disconnect between what's needed in the economic sector versus what people are actually learning in school, and the perennial challenge, not just in Marin, of like meeting those two together. And seeing this race-related conversation and the really serious diabolical disparities in Marin County and the economic development conversation together in one place, I haven't seen that a lot. So I'd really like
I wish you were here for our earlier remarks because we focused on that.
I can absolutely update you on what our organization has done for that. First and foremost, and Damon, who serves on my board, can attest to this, when I first came in, I asked the board to take a look at our mission statement, which has a reference to social equity in there. And I asked them for the leeway for the organization to try to understand what that means in the economic development context and what we can do to have some type of impact there. And what we came out with is looking at the workforce development piece, but focusing on what we call inclusive economic development, which is a very typical approach in economic development, which means integrating other populations. And I don't just mean by race, but I also mean disabled, formerly incarcerated, veterans, older adults, everybody. So we are actually starting to engage very deeply with Marin City CDC, Canal Alliance, YWCA over 50, I mean, you name them, the Center for Independent Living, all of those we have met with and engaged and talked to them about having an inclusive workforce, number one. Number two, there are not, to my knowledge, any separate economic development conversations going on that might be about, well, what do we do for this population that don't include that population in the discussion. That may have been your experience in the past, but I don't see that happening, and we're sort of the one driving the nascent economic development agenda that's here.
Marin Economic Forum, is that your organization?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
And I've read the report that you referenced.
But I believe somebody from Marin Economic Forum showed up to the August 25th City Council hearing in Novato, and again, I might be wrong, to speak against the increase in minimum wage.
No, so we are not, that's not true.
That's not
that
true.
was not our organization. We are not an advocacy organization, actually.
Okay.
So our job is to provide the county, residents and public sector and everybody else, objective economic data to empower decision making. We don't give our opinions. We cite data. So sometimes people will say, what is the economic impact of building a hotel here? And that will inevitably be somewhat positive from the perspective of job creation, tax revenues, those types of things. It doesn't mean we're supporting it or saying that they should build it. We're simply stating here's the facts behind it. Now, as I look at the social equity piece and I look at workforce development and inclusive workforce, there is an opportunity for us to be a little bit more of an advocate for the inclusion part, and that's what we're trying to do there. But we don't weigh in on things like whether they should raise minimum wage or not. That's not our business.
Great. Thanks.
One last question.
Yeah, following on your point about housing, as Damon has indicated, the county's looking at a lot of approaches. One of them is increasing the number of second units that are available. And there's a lot of work potentially here in Marin in converting second units. And also there's a lot of work in terms of making homes up to current standards in terms of energy efficiency. And ultimately the state is now setting a standard of zero net energy. So, we talked about solar jobs going quickly. Well, rather than putting solar on homes that are leaking a lot of energy, which, much of Marin's housing stock was built before there were these energy standards. And so there's a tremendous amount of work available there. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy just came out with a report. It's called Halfway There. Energy efficiency can cut energy use and greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2050. And you look at these are the various sectors. This top part is housing sector in terms of appliances, in terms of getting homes up to current standards and then going for zero net energy. Now those sectors continue to grow over time. We get people involved in early stage, lower cost retrofits, and we move them progressively with incentives or whatever. But it's a it's a healthy job kind of thing. And when we're talking about also having more electric bikes and essentially what we're talking about is a lot of coordination, and that's sort of a middle level to upper level skill. It's a management skill to coordinate between getting these aspects of our transportation and just even maintenance. Alex Stadner just recently started this 4-season stewardship, and he's seeing tremendous demand for just things like changing your air filters on your HVAC, and what about things like cleaning solar panels? I mean, if you don't clean them periodically, their production goes down. So there's all kinds of things that are about optimizing sustainability and efficiency, and we need people skilled to do those things.
Well, thank you for that comment, and I think at that point we will thank our panel, our audience.